Hello everyone. Today I want to talk about a subject that a lot of people struggle with. And it's a subtle one, and it's something that happens up here in your mind. It's not about the tools, it's not about your process, it is about something that is a stumbling block to so many artists, and I see it over and over and over again. And we don't often talk about this one, but it's a big one. I work with people, I've worked with thousands of people during my career. 3 decades of working on a lot of different studios and a lot of different roles. And one of the things that I was responsible for, once I got to a lead level and then to a director level, was making sure that my team had what they needed so that they could thrive. That's what good leadership is you as a leader are there to make sure that your team has all the tools that they can, all the knowledge that they can, so that they can thrive in creating beautiful artwork so that we can make a product, something amazing and something magical to people. And I see this theme over and over and over and over and over. And as I mentor people now, I see people get stuck on this one issue. So let's talk about this. Let's go back and talk about the way that we learn. How do we grow as an artist? Well, as children, we usually start with lines. And it is a simplification of the world. We'll draw stick figures. We'll do lines for a body, lines for arms, line for figures, dots for eyes, a little line for the mouth. And that is a very two-dimensional way of thinking. And this is understandable because as children, we're learning to just be human. We're learning to walk and to talk and to eat and to just exist and to, terrorize our older siblings and our parents. And that's a lot of work. So it's okay that we start with this very simple way of thinking. But as we grow in our artwork, we start to see that the world is a little bit more. So we were like, well, an arm isn't really a line, it's more of a tube. And fingers aren't just lines, maybe they're like little sausages or jelly beans, and we can see a lot more to the world. And a face is more of a circle, and then our eyes are circles and not dots, and then there's irises and pupils and nostrils, and there's like so many more things to see from a two-dimensional perspective. So we learn to see the world as a two-dimensional interpretation in our drawings of this three-dimensional world. And we add color to it, and we do coloring book pages, and we say, what color is this object? This ball is red, this grass is green. The tree trunk is brown, and the leaves are green, and the sky is blue, and clouds are white, and it is our oversimplification of the world. We reach a point, though, where we transition from 2D thinking to 3D thinking, and this is where we add another axis. 2D thinking is X and Y coordinates. And then 3D thinking adds the Z coordinates into depth in space. If we take 3 points, we can map something into 3D space. And if we connect those lines together, we get three-dimensional geometry. And that is what three-dimensional thinking is. So instead of having squares and circles and triangles, we now have cubes and spheres and pyramids and so many more shapes to work with. Instead of seeing the world as a series of lines, we can see the world as a series of values and light and dark, light and shadow. And this is a magic moment when you learn this in your life. Like I remember when I was a child, I learned about shading and I stopped doing so much line art and I started doing shading. And that's where my world expanded. This was so incredible to be able to see that objects are three-dimensional and that I can convey a lot more information by doing light and dark and all those subtle shifts through the gray zones of my pencil art to convey so much more. Also, I realized that light is not like a local object doesn't just have a color, it has a material. There's material in light that defines what color do I put on canvas? Well, it depends on the color of the light and the color and attributes of that material. So metal objects, wooden objects, translucent objects, they have a lot more properties more than just color. And this is where your world expands even more. Eventually we reach the 4th dimension. So we've got the 3 dimensions of the world, and the 4th dimension is time. So instead of just drawing a pretty picture, if we add time to it, the 4th dimension is in the realm where we start to get stories. And stories lead to meaning and to philosophy, and the real human connection can happen in the 4th dimension. In fact, I think a lot of art gets really exciting when we can, as a human, step outside of time in our world. Like when we're doing storytelling, we can zoom back and say, I can see the beginning, the middle, and the end all at the same time because I'm outlining my story. Where do the characters start? What is their world? How does it change as they go along? How does it end? And I can plan my entire universe from this 4th dimensional perspective. And this is magic. This is really where human connection can be utilized. And I think that this is the place of most joy in art, is when you actually get into telling what it means to be human and what is your perspective of the world. So what is the problem? What is the thing that stops people? It comes from a surprising place, and it's actually those moments of magic when you learn a new idea and you're like, that's it. This is the way the world works. Like transitioning from drawing lines to drawing something with shading, for many people is just this incredible moment where you learn some new thing. It is your tool that you have been taught, and you've watched the joy of how your art expands, and you turn that into a rule. You turn that into a hard, stone-clad absolute. And that's the death in your art. That moment of joy is actually the thing that can hold you back. Now, I don't want to diminish the joy at all. The joy is good. It's just when we turn our thinking to this is the answer. Have you seen other videos where teachers teach this is the rule, this is the magic of what you need? And sometimes it's software, like get this new plugin, it's going to change everything in your art. Or like, this is the magic, do this in your art, not that. And this is the one key to making everything magic. Well, that's all clickbait. And I try really hard not to do things that don't tell the truth in the videos. Like I don't want clickbait that are like, oh, this is just kind of a lie. But sometimes it's done unintentionally because it is something that someone was excited about. And it did change their artwork, and it was magic for them, but it might not be the complete picture to allow for more growth beyond it. The honest truth is that the transition between 2D thinking, 3D thinking, and 4D thinking, it's not a linear approach. It's not like one day you just click and you're like, yeah, I understand 3D now, so all of my artwork now looks 3D. Oh, and now I'm into storytelling, so I just reached this point where everything is good storytelling. It doesn't happen like that. It is a blurry line. And sometimes we will have partial transitions where we will have one element of this is 3D, but some things are still stuck in the 2D realm. Let's look at Disney films, animated films, as an example of this. Look at Snow White. Look at the juxtaposition between the characters and the background. The backgrounds are three-dimensional worlds that are created with watercolor. The characters are very flat painted on top of them, and there is this contrast between these two different ways of thinking. 2D thinking, 3D thinking. Look at Pinocchio. Pinocchio had the same thing. The backgrounds are rich with good perspective and light and color and material and shading and texture. And then the characters are just one flat color done over top with local color. It's done like a coloring book over top. Look at Sleeping Beauty. This one is interesting because this is a 2.5D way of thinking. Look at these trees. The trees, from the camera's perspective, are squares. And then the roots and everything are almost like they're facing the camera, and it's like a paper cutout of what the actual tree shapes are. They are a two-dimensional way of thinking with a three-dimensional texture over top, so it's kind of like a halfway zone. Let's look at 101 Dalmatians. At this point, they decided, you know what, we don't like this contrast, and we can't make our characters look as 3D as the backgrounds. That's too much work. So let's just make the backgrounds look like the characters. They pulled everything back to a more two-dimensional look so that it was at least consistent. And nowadays we have computer technology that makes all of this far more complicated, but also much more rich. We have 3D animated films where now we build three-dimensional puppets of characters in three-dimensional worlds, and now we can get all the complexity of light and texture and color into our animated films. And then there's new technology like the movie Klaus. I love Klaus, I talk about it all the time. It's a 2D animated film. This is all hand-drawn 2D animation, but they have tools to be able to shade and do light and shadow and bounce light to match the look of three-dimensional objects. And that's just really, really awesome. So as you're transitioning and you're growing in your art, try not to turn something that is magic to you into a hard set rule. There are more ways of thinking rather than just your way of thinking. This is why international travel is so important to me, to get outside of my bubble and to see different political systems, different cultural systems, different belief systems, different food, different ways that they drive cars, and different traffic systems and money systems, and so many different ways of the world, to get out of my bubble of going, this is the one way to do it, when I get into other places, I can realize that it's different. And there's some things that I like better about the way I do it and my culture does it. And there's other ways that I like where this culture does it. But in the end, it's just differences. And differences are beautiful. And differences are a wonderful way to see the world from more perspectives. This is how to think fourth dimensionally about your life and about your art. This goes beyond just art training, by the way. This is about your entire belief systems and how you connect with other human beings. And I highly encourage fourth dimensional thinking, where you can kind of like get outside of your own bubble and see your entire world and see other people's worlds and other people's perspectives, and then learn from that and go, there's beauty in that. There's beauty in this. There's difference in here. And though this might seem scary, it's not bad. It's just different. And different can be so rich and beautiful and alive. I love international travel just to learn the beauty of different cultures around the world. And I do the same thing in my artwork. I want to see other people's approach. I want to learn, like this is how they do an entire painting with sand, and this is how they do it in 2D, and this is how they do it in 3D, and this is how they do it with physical cameras and cinematography, and this is how to, this is how they light theme parks and how we light games and how we, do any type of art. I'm always wanting to learn and be curious, and I want to think of these rules not as rules, but as tools that can be expanded on. Let me talk about a couple of examples of things that I think people take for rules where they really shouldn't. They shouldn't limit themselves. One is in proportions. So I think that as people learn to draw faces, they're often like, how do I do this? How do I draw a human face that's believable? Mine's all smushy. And so there is a tool for you to learn, well, eyes are usually halfway down the head. And then your nostrils usually come underneath this part of your eyes. And then from your nose, it goes to your earlobes. And there's like certain rules that can be seen as a tool to help you find the proportions. And so if you can see a human head, not as front on, but at an angle, and you know these proportions and you learn how to map from 3D down into the positions of the head, it can be a wonderful tool for helping you understand all of this complex information of the world to make a head that looks believable from that angle. But remember, this is not a hard rule. If you follow this rule forever, all of your characters are going to look exactly the same. And real human heads have a lot more variety. Some people's eyes aren't in the middle of their head. Some people's eyes are really close together. Some are really far apart. Some are really big. Some are really small. There's a lot of variety here. So remember, it is a tool. It is a starting place. It is not a rule. Another one that gets me all the time is the idea of, if there's warm light, there's cool shadows. If there's cool light, there's warm shadows. And it is taught in art schools all over the world. And it's taught here on YouTube all the time. This is a tool, not a rule. I have an entire video about it you can watch here if you want. But shadows are black. The end. The definition of a shadow is the absence of light. So from this light source, the shadow of this light onto my face, the warm light onto my face, if I turn off all the other lights, over here will be black. The blue that you're seeing over here, the cool shadow, is not coming from that light source. It's not tied to that light source. It's tied to the light, the blue light that I have over there, and the blue light that I have behind me that's shining onto me. I think that we have this thing of confirmation bias. So like when we go out into nature, we'll often see sun and sky. So often the sunlight is warm, and then this side of our face is lit with the blue of the sky. It is a second light source. But we often will mistake this as a hard set rule, that this shadow color comes from that warm light. And it's just not the truth. It's not the whole picture. And I see so many people get stuck into these rules. Remember, art schools are trying to teach like they teach science, like they teach language. This is the rule. This is the right way. This is the wrong way, the end. And I need to grade you and judge you based off of this set of rules. Here is your grade as to whether you did well with this set of rules. That's not art. Art is communication of story, the end. In my mind, that's what art is. Art is your ability to tell a story. And I've seen stories told that have all kinds of broken rules. I've seen things where they're just completely flat. There's no light and shadow. There's no material. The perspective is broken. But if it moves me emotionally, great. Sometimes these rules or these tools can be expanded to help my storytelling to make it more of an impactful experience for you as an audience member. So I want to utilize all of these tools, but they are not something that should be graded all the time. Here's another rule that I think I really see a lot of struggle with, and a lot of people come to me and they're like, I saw online that you shouldn't paint in color, you should paint in black and white first and then add the color afterwards. Here's my problem with this one. I do believe that value structures are important. And somebody who learned to really judge your value structures as like value, 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 value is the thing that matters. It might be magic in one person's life, but it's not the complete picture. Value has two siblings that are tied together with it when we're dealing with colored images. And like if you're doing the world in pencil or charcoal, then great, you're value-based thinking, that's all you need because you are never going to add color. But once you add color, you have to remember that the two siblings of value are hue and saturation. The three of these are inseparable. They are a trio of characters that really work well together and they can't be separated. And you can have the greater, more mature cousin of value is contrast. And contrast can be in value, but it can also be in hue and saturation. Like look at a couple of these images. This is from the movie Klaus, and this is a shot where if I turn this black and white, you can't really tell where to look because there's not a lot of contrast in the value structures. But if I turn it back color, you can see the hue change here. We're in a sea of kind of like grays and blues, and then there's one bit of orange. So my eye will go to there because of the hue and saturation contrast. Look at this other image. This is an image that I took from an airplane of a sunrise. And in black and white, it looks like there's not enough value structure. But in color, there is hue contrast and saturation contrast where the oranges and the blue next to each other. As a human, I see this value change, this contrast in the hues and the saturations, and that's what makes it appealing. Remember, nobody's going to be judging, like we don't have art school in our pocket where when you go out into nature, you're playing a game or you're watching a movie and somebody pauses, they turn it black and white and they look at it and they go, you failed as an artist because you didn't have good value structures. Haha, you lose, I give you a poor grade. And yet we do this to ourselves with our art the whole time. The human experience is to look at contrast. We are looking for contrasts. So I rarely change my artwork black and white because I don't want to judge it based on value alone. Sometimes I do, but I even realize that some of the tools of doing this is actually a trap for a lot of people. A lot of times your magic moment might be something that stops other people from growing in their artwork. And this is where it gets complicated. The world, there's so much to learn. And everybody's growth is a little bit different. So making something into a hard set rule might actually kick someone out of the industry and make them stop their art. Versus if you say it as this is a tool for you to grow in, and this is where I've learned, this is my story and my perspective, and it's really worked for me, this has been great, but I realize that I don't have all of the knowledge. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? And this is like the more you learn, the more you realize how much you have to learn, and that often your confidence will drop when you start to learn a subject. You know, that once you learn it, you're like, your confidence is really high until you learn it. And then you're like, oh no. And then as you actually learn the skills, your confidence comes back up and you're like, okay, I can handle this. I've taken this knowledge in my head and let it seep down into my subconscious and down into my fingers and into my art. And now it's not so scary anymore. And I feel like I understand this. And this is where growth happens. But the moment that you lock something in as an absolute, as a rule, you're kind of screwed. That's it. You can't really grow anymore. I encourage you to think fourth dimensionally. I want you to always be open to learning and being curious. Curiosity is one thing that pulls me along. It's one thing that just makes me so alive. I'm always wanting to learn just for the joy of seeing other perspectives. I want to get outside of my culture, outside of my bubble, outside of my normal processes and tools, and just see the way other people do it, because there might be things that I can take from that. And I can use that to enhance my own story and my own storytelling. Thank you again for watching. Again, I don't really have sponsors on this channel other than myself. So if this video was encouraging and it was great for you, awesome. You know, I offer all of these free videos. If you want to learn more, I do have courses on my website, lightingmentor.com. feel free to go there. I offer mentorships. I help people grow in their artwork. If that's something you're interested in, that's always available to you. Thank you again for watching. See you again next time.